So I was in Marks and Spencer's and I came across an article, and it's as follows. Guide leader says she was sacked for telling bosses that new transgender policies could pose a risk. Hang on, I'm going to get the microphone nearer. Let's just scroll down a bit here. When the guides decided to allow boys who believe they are girls to join for the first time last year, unit leader Helen Watts accepted the move with a tolerant shrug of the shoulders. But after discovering the organisation had gone one step further by ruling that they could share showers and tents with girls on camping trips, the city analyst felt compelled to speak out. So what's going on is there are boys who feel they're really girls, and so long as they're immature boys, physically immature, I don't see much of a problem either, most of the time. But it gets worse, because the new rules applied not just to boys, but also to men who, if they said they identified as women, could be appointed as guide leaders, supervising youngsters on trips. It was a move Helen believed posed a grave risk to girls in her charge. Now, let's just unpack this a little bit. I used to have a friend who was a transgender woman. She had been a man, but she went through the awful rite of passage of becoming a woman with the series of operations and the hormone treatment and all that really difficult stuff. And I never regarded her as anything other than a woman. She was a warm, witty woman. Now, she had become physically a woman. And you could see that that's what she was. Nevertheless, had it been in my power, I would have asked her not to participate in competitive sports against other women, because the fact is she still had the structure, the bone structure, the physical structure and the musculature of a man. But she never tried to do anything like this because she understood what the situation was. We're not talking about people like my friend. We're talking about men who remain men in every physical way and put on a dress and slap some lipstick on and say that makes them women. And I beg to differ. Now, there is something else. When a person wishes to be the other sex, there is something wrong with them. There's something wrong. Now, this doesn't make them lesser people, but it does mean there's some sort of a disconnect in their personality. I'm talking about people who genuinely believe that they are the opposite sex. And now we're talking about men genuinely believing they're women and boys genuinely believing they're women. It's not so severe in boys because, as we all know, being a kid, you can get all sorts of ideas in your head out of which you grow eventually. But when a man says he's a woman, puts on a dress and keeps all the important masculine bits that we generally agree make him a man, there's something wrong with him. And such a person should not be in charge of children. I'm not saying such a person should be beaten up. I'm not saying such a person should be excluded from work. But such a person should not be in unsupervised charge of children. And for a couple of reasons. The first is that he may not be a true transgender. He may be faking it because he's really a kiddie fiddler and wants to get into the unsupervised company of a lot of little girls. And this is a possibility, whether we like it or not. And any true transgender man of goodwill would understand that. Then there is another sort of transgender man. There is the sort who is genuinely confused about his gender. And he has a problem. I'm just going to try changing this. I might have to cut something out here. Right, I'm back. Suicide rate and suicidal tendencies among transgender persons are considerably high compared to general population. Hence, this review is an attempt to understand the issues around the suicide and suicidal behaviour among transgender persons. The suicide attempt rate among transgender persons ranges from 32 to 50% across the countries. Gender-based victimisation, discrimination, bullying, violence, being rejected by the family, friends and community, harassment by intimate partner, family members, police and public, discrimination and ill treatment at healthcare system are the major risk factors that influence the suicidal behaviour among transgender persons. Okay, so what they're saying here is that society is to blame for the suicidal behaviour and feelings among transgender people. That could very well be the case. It could also be the case that these people have a genuine depressive illness which manifests itself in this way. Whatever the reason, is it a good idea to have people who are between 30 and 50% more likely to make suicide attempts, to put them in charge of a bunch of little girls? What if these kids discover that their girl guide leader is hanging from a pole behind the latrines on one camping trip that they've gone to? This could happen to anyone, of course, but if we know it's got a 30 to 50% higher chance of happening to somebody who's transgender, it's a risk we shouldn't take, not with our children. Anyway, back to this. When the guys decided to allow boys who believe they are girls to join for the first time last year, unit leader Helen Watts accepted the move with a tolerant shrug of the shoulders. But after discovering the organisation had gone one step further by ruling they could share showers and tents with girls on camping trips, the city analyst felt compelled to speak out. After all, the new rules applied not just to boys, but also to men, who, if they said they identified as women, could be appointed as guide leaders, supervising youngsters on trips away. It was a move Helen believed posed a grave risk to girls in her charge. What piqued her anger as much as anything else was that to avoid falling foul of equality laws, the guides insisted parents must be kept in the dark. And that's where this goes into looping lunacy. She says if a boy is confused about what sex they are, then I would be more than happy to welcome them to girl guiding. It might help them. But the extremes the guides were going to was putting children in danger, and I was not alone in believing this. I just could not remain silent. No. How can a responsible leader of a group of young children, allow them to go off with somebody who might be mentally ill without telling the parents? How could she look those parents in the eyes? Helen hoped a polite letter might convince those at the top to think again. To her astonishment, what came back was an arrogant brush-off. Well, you know, this is the Daily Mail. It might not have been an arrogant brush-off. I don't know whether she said that or the Daily Mail said that. But the fact is, they refused even to address her genuine fears. None of my safeguarding concerns were answered, Helen says. Instead, they tried to rewrite history by suggesting that we were all just girls together, like we had always been. Now, girls' needs were coming second to an ideology. Look, you aren't girls together if you've got people there who are in full possession of all the male sexual organs. So what happened was she set up a private Facebook group to discuss her fears with a few other people. And then we see ideology in action. What followed was a troubling series of events worthy of your world. Yeah, that's the Daily Mail. Unbeknown to Helen, lurking in the group, lurking, that's a good word, was a fifth columnist, that's another good word, who set about recording their online conversations. So without disclosing himself or herself, somebody with an ideological agenda informed on her to the head of the organisation. Now, that reminded me of something. I couldn't find any reference to it, but many years ago, gosh, it could be 15 years ago, there was a case in which the headmistress of a school was talking on the phone to somebody who was telling her about a temporary teacher who was going to be at the school. Apparently the school had some staffing problems and this temporary teacher was not very experienced, according to the headmistress. And she said to this person, probably some bureaucrat or other, I don't want another weak teacher. Now, apparently this headmistress had a heavy Scottish accent. And this bureaucrat on the other end of the phone heard, I don't want another WOG teacher. Now that is a terrible insult. You don't call people by that word nowadays. In English, I don't know how it is in America, but that's a word referring to anyone of a dark complexion. It's a very nasty insult. But it's also ridiculous that this person should have thought that that teacher would have said that word. There's just no possibility that the headmistress of a multicultural school would say that to an official. It's just total nonsense. But that's what the official heard. That's what the official wanted to hear. And that's what the official said when he or she started a huge fuss about this teacher who was crucified by the press, by a sort of huge steamroller grinding of bureaucratic viciousness. And I don't know what happened to the teacher, but I suspect she retired early. And we probably lost a good headmistress. But even worse than that, I was listening to a talk show on the radio at around the time of that. And some guy, and I know he was very far left because the rest of the conversation gave me that impression. However, I can't remember the exact conversation. It's just one section of it leapt out at me. And I have not forgotten it. And it was this. He said to the presenter of the programme, it's a good thing that she's being sacked. because even if she's not guilty, this makes a good example to everybody else. This is what ideology does to people's brains. And this is what's happened here with the Girl Guides. The person who shopped her and her friends on this Facebook page had that mindset. No, these people weren't worrying, they were transphobes. And that's all that this person could see. The spy informed on her and others to the organisation's chiefs, sparking a 4-month investigation. Here is a woman who volunteers her time to look after children, to instill in them values and skills and hope for the future, and she is subjected to a 4-month star chamber. This whole business concluded last month after the arrival in the post of a pre-prepared confession that they demanded she sign. Helen refused and was later expelled, according to this, in a dispassionate phone call, whatever that means. Now, I've been accused of thinking all men are predatory, which is not the case. But it would only take one incident and the consequences would be catastrophic. I only have the safety of children at heart, and for that I've been kicked out. It's just heartbreaking. Well, look, first of all, here we have the cry of a true naive, somebody who believes that people are reasonable, just discovered that they're not. But you know what? One incident doesn't have to be some incident of a trans man dressed as a woman interfering with girls. Because when you get a group of girls and there's a boy who's possibly maybe a little effeminate, which is why he thought he would be more comfortable as a girl anyway, maybe a bit weak, I don't know. If he finds himself among a bunch of girls, they could be just as vicious to him as just about anything. That wouldn't be a good experience for him either. That could lead to some serious trouble. It's not just the girls we've got to worry about, it's the boys. These people need some sort of psychiatric help, but they don't need to be shoved into that sort of a situation. And certainly a man who should know better should not be in that situation. Let's see what's further down here. But when I raised my concerns about safety and the policy requiring leaders to keep secrets from parents, this is some official or other, got very defensive. She said, "You can't out individuals." Well, I'm afraid you can. Last night, a girl guiding spokeswoman insisted that keeping girls safe was the #1 priority. I just notice all these buzzwords. You know, when you're on the phone and you've got this recording and this woman is saying, "Your call is important to us," and you bloody know that it isn't. Was the #1 priority. And as an organisation, we pride ourselves on caring for every individual. There's the other buzzword. Simply being told it does not make someone more of a safeguarding risk than any other person. Well, yes, it does. Both from a personal safety point of view and the safety of the girls. Addressing the inquiry into Helen's conduct, she added, "We have a thorough and robust investigations process." Yeah, that's the other buzzword. I hate that robust because it's getting used all the time now and it means nothing. And the withdrawal of membership is always a last resort. Yeah, but we take very seriously, your call is important to us, any breach of our volunteer code of conduct or policies. The only code of conduct that this woman breached is a code of conduct in which she wants to protect children. And this organisation will allow a majority to suffer just so that they can feel good about their ideological purity. I'm very grateful for financial contributions. But if you don't want to give money, you can still help a lot by sharing this and other videos I've made. Also, remember to check your subscription from time to time, as sometimes subscriptions get erased for one reason or another. Till next time.